Hello, this is your part two today, 6/14, Monday. You should have already watched another literacy video. If you didn't, stop now and go watch the other one that came before this. You have to go back up on Canvas and watch that first. I realized in the last lesson, though, I hope nobody got confused because I mentioned this on Friday, but it had the wrong date on it here. So it's because we were going to do it on Friday and we didn't. I said you could, I let some of you start on it. And so hopefully that didn't confuse anybody because, I was referencing this page and it did have the wrong date on it. So hopefully that didn't confuse anyone. But for this lesson, this is what you should have already done at this point today. If you haven't, like I said, stop, go watch the other video. This is what we're going to work on now. Okay. So this is our second literacy today. After this, you will have a very small health thing and a small art thing, and then you're pretty much good to go. Not too bad. So, and this lesson will probably be a bit shorter. So what we wwere talking about earlier today was our elements of narrative poetry, right? And how the elements of a narrative are similar to elements that you're going to see in short story narratives, in chapter books, but they're done in a poetry format, right? And so that's what we were talking about before. But what is narrative poetry? It has a beginning, middle, end. It has characters. Those are the things that it has to have, but also it might have other literary elements like setting. Did I say plot? I think I just said that. Plot, dialogue, problem, and solution. But like I said, characters and plot are the must-haves. Okay. These other elements will show up in some narrative poetry, but not in all, just because of the length, really. So you'll see some of these or all of these within a narrative poem. Today, though, we just had an introduction lesson on kind of the big three, being character, setting, and plot. I also asked you to look at rhyme. But now, today, in the second lesson here, we're going to focus in on just characters, okay? And that's also going to be what we're going to talk about tomorrow again in class. However, that doesn't mean you should do this lesson because this is the sort of preparation for tomorrow, okay? So we're going to analyze characters within narrative poetry. In narrative poetry, one or more characters will be included in the poem. In short poems, we do tend to see just one main character. That is not a rule, though. So if you think back to the ones we were reading earlier today, there was the one about the fishing trip. There were two people in that. We also read the one about Timothy Toppin. There was like Timothy, mom, brother, sister, dad. I think that was it. So there were a few, but really Timothy was the main character, right? They just were peripheral characters that came in for a second. And then we also were looking at this, the meme poem, which really was, again, it was just the main character who was the narrator and the character. And then mom was in it for like 2 seconds, right? So yes, there will often be a couple characters, but often there's just one main character that's throughout the poem. Depends a lot on length. And as we're reading these poems, we can find out about the character or character traits through the poem. As we read, right, we can infer some things about how that character acts and thinks. Sometimes the character will learn a lesson in the over the course of the poem, but it really depends on the poem. Definitely not every time. That tends to be more in poems that are like fables or more like folktale stories, things of that nature, where they're trying to give you a lesson or a moral. It depends again on the story. However, if there's a narrative poem, we're going to get some kind of character trait out of that character. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What are character traits? Well, this is something that should be a familiar concept to you because every time you've learned about narratives or fictional stories, your teacher has talked about character traits. And I'm not talking about just me, I'm talking about teachers from the beginning of your education. Character traits aren't any different really in poetry, except usually it's a little harder to find them. Character traits are made up of three main components. A lot of times people think character traits are just like, oh, they're funny, or oh, they're pretty. But it's deeper than that, and you want to think about it in three ways. Way one, how the character acts, their personality, using descriptive words. Okay, I'm going to come over and talk about this in a minute. But personality traits. Then what a character looks like. So that's more the physical side, the physical characteristics, whereas this is more like their personality, right? How they act inside and outwardly. And so honestly, though, you're not going to see much of this in poetry because think about the poems we just read earlier. We don't know anything about how those people looked because they're short, and that's not really the point. You might see it sometimes, but pretty unusual actually within a poem structure, at least the poems we're going to be looking at. And then what's the character's motivation? That's their goal. Like, what do they want in the story? And that is the third thing that makes up components of character traits, because it's a three-pronged thing: looks, personality, motivation. Again, you might not see step two or three in a poem. It really depends on the poem, but I want you to look for those components. Okay, now here's an example of what I mean by personality. Characters in story all have personalities, like you and me. They can be shy, outgoing, friendly, or even rude. So that's how they act, right? And so in this case, they're talking about Anyal, and she is kind to people and animals. So that's how she acts. She's smart in math. That's another personality trait. She's artistic, and she's quiet when she speaks. Those are all parts of her personality. I didn't hear anything about how Anyal looks. We can kind of see her here, but I didn't see how she looks. I just see how she acts, really. And I didn't really see what her motivation is either. So these are examples really of just step one. And remember, when you're trying to build a character, you want it to be more specific like this. You don't want to just say one thing, because nobody has one personality trait. We have many traits that make us unique and interesting, right? And so let's look at character traits a little deeper. Just like characters in a story, everyone has personality traits. Real people, right, have personality traits. And traits are just like words that describe us and how we act. They're adjectives, because adjectives describe a noun. And so a noun is a person, place, or thing. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. So if I'm describing me or you or a character in a story, I'm using adjectives because they describe nouns. And a person is a noun. So I'm going to choose 5 words that I think describe my personality, which, remember, that's component 1 here. 5 words just describe my personality, not how I look, not what motivates me, just my personality. Then I'm going to choose 1 negative trait because I want to be honest. Nobody's perfect. We have positive and negative things about us. That's why on this list here, you're going to notice that it's listed as positives and negatives. Okay, so notice we've got, here, I'm going to try to make this a little bigger here. We've got positive and negatives. We've got kind and mean, confident and secure, good, bad, happy, sad. Because people are interesting and different and unique, and we are complex. We're not one flat personality trait all the time. That would make you pretty boring if you were just one thing all the time, right? So what I like about this is that it gives you a lot of variety of words. Sometimes people love to just pick the easiest words. Happy. I'm a very happy person. Okay, well, cool. But look at all these synonyms for happy. So pick a word that's more interesting for yourself instead of just, I'm happy, nice, and funny. Okay, well, okay. I want to hear words that are more 4th grade level words. Okay? So that's why those words are at the top, because they're kind of boring words. Below are words that mean similar things that are much more interesting. So try to find a word that's a little more interesting. Not what we call dead words, which are overused words. They're too simple. So I'm going to pick 5 for me, and then you're going to pick 5 for you, which I'm very excited to read yours. I'm going to try, it would be interesting. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 categories, so I'm going to pick 1 from each. Obviously, I'm going to think of a positive or a negative. I'm not going to choose 1, 1, 1, 1. That would be 10 traits I'm going to pick. So I'm going to just go 1 table at a time and pick 1 trait that I think fits me. I'm going to scan it. I would say on this list here, something that I would say about myself is honest. I'm a very honest person, sometimes overly honest, as I'm sure you guys have figured out. Very, very honest. I really care about that. It motivates me a lot and is important to me. There are probably other things that fit me on this list, but I'm just going to pick 1 from each. You do not have to do it the same way I am. Okay, let's see. What about on here? I'm looking through all the words. I'm seeing a word that I think, oh, you know what? I'll pick a negative one. I'm very stubborn. Sometimes I get really set in my ways. So this is on this side. I'm very opinionated. It's hard for me sometimes to hear other perspectives. I try very, very hard. I've gotten so much better. But sometimes people give me advice and I have a hard time listening. I'm just a very stubborn person. So see, there are negatives, right? And if I see another negative, I'll add it. I'll be honest. There are many other things on this list I would use to describe myself too, but I'm just going to pick 5 total. Let's see. Do I see any on here? Oh, assertive. I'm very assertive. I saw that one right away. Assertive means you stand up for what you believe in and you're bold and you're kind of confident. You'll say what you need to say. You're a little aggressive sometimes, but you don't back down from things you believe in, which is definitely me. Let's see over here. These are harder ones, the happy, sad ones. I get bored a lot, so I'll be honest. I'll choose another one. I get bored a lot. It's easy for me to get bored. So I'll choose another one because remember, we're all made up of lots of traits. And then I'll pick a nice one this time. I will say creative. I'm a pretty creative person. Okay, so see, I have lots of things about me. I could add probably a million more, but I'm going to just pick 5. Honest, stubborn, assertive, bored, and creative. I picked 2 that were negative. You can just pick 1 if you're not ready to admit all the negative things. Just pick 1, but we all have them and it's okay. It really is. Nobody's perfect. They might want you to think they are, but they're not. So this is an example, again, of personality. So you're going to try this yourself. On here, let me find the right page. Here it is. Choose 5 words that describe you. Include at least 1 negative trait. We all have them. It's okay to just list them today. Okay, we're just making a list. You can write it in a sentence like 5 character traits about me are and list them out. Or you can just list them in bullet points or in a list like mine. And then I also want you to do this for a friend or family member. So pick 1 person in your life. It could be mom, dad, brother, sister. It could be me. It could be your best friend. It doesn't really matter who. Pick 1 person and then describe them with 5 words. I would like you to tell me who that person is. You don't have to tell me their name. You could just say best friend, sister, mom. I want to know their relationship to you. And you're going to do the same thing, 5 words. Okay? Because I want you to get used to practicing how to describe somebody. Now, that was only 1 component, right? Oops. Let me go back here. After you've done that, you might want to pause so you can make sure you get that written. You're going to answer number 1 and 2. And you can pause here if you're going to do that now. Okay. Hopefully now you've answered number 1 and 2. We're going to move on to the next component of character traits, which would be looks. You know, when you go down into like kindergarten, you ask somebody to describe somebody, they tend to go more looks first. So this is, you know, only one very small component of what a person is. It doesn't tell you anything about their heart and how they act, right? So believe it or not, you know, like I said earlier, in poetry, you're not going to see this very much because, you know, it's very short. So they're not going to get into the looks all that often. But you might see it a little. And so when you're thinking of looks, you're thinking of the outside. What do you see, right? How do they look? You can describe, you know, hair, body type, skin color, eye color, height, how they dress, those kinds of things. Okay, so here's this kid here, and they're saying, oh, we see his brown hair. Oh, no, wait, that's a girl. The haircut looked like a boy for a second, but I think they're wearing a dress. So I'm actually not entirely sure, but that's okay. I think, let's just say this person, since I'm not positive, has brown hair. They have blue eyes, tank top, blue shorts, tennis shoes, and tan skin. So notice they're like describing their outfit too. So me, for example, blondish brown hair or golden hair. I would say I have a pretty big chin. I have blue eyes. All right. I wear pretty bright makeup. Right now I'm wearing a striped t-shirt with a strawberry on it and a red headband. Okay, my hair is really big. I'm pretty tall. Those are physical traits. We're not going to describe these anywhere today because, again, we're not going to see them all that much in poetry. And this is the simplest task that you can have when it comes to character traits. It's the easiest one to do. Now, this is the harder one to do, which is motivation. Remember I said goal. What drives that character? Why do they do the things they do? Okay. One of the reasons Mrs. Croteau's favorite characters are bad guys is because the bad guys usually have the more interesting backstories. You know, a good guy's like, I'm a hero. And you're like, okay, why? And usually it's really simple because they want everybody to like them or something. The bad guy stories, a lot of the time they have some tragic past and maybe they were really good once, but then something terrible happened to them and now they're bad and angry. And those stories are fascinating to me. And so why do characters do what they do? And so you want to think about what do they want, right? What's their goal and like why? and that's not always going to be obvious. You have to infer quite a bit. Okay. And so what is the character's goal in the story? And how you can figure this out is you can think about what does the character want to achieve? Not every narrative poem will have this. Now, here's some examples of character motivations. They're organized in terms of categories. The character won't necessarily fall into a motivation for each category. They might have one or two. They might have all. But these are a little, these are less relevant to you right now because this is just talking about, well, what is their role in the story? And these are words you're not going to learn until you're a lot older. So don't worry too much about the orange. But think about, I would say, look at yellow up. You should know some of these words. What is their, what is their goal? Is it to survive? Is it that they're motivated by failure? Maybe they failed in the past and now they're like, I don't want to fail again. So that motivates them forward. Maybe it's peer pressure. Maybe they're just curious. Perhaps they're guilty about something. Maybe it's desire. Maybe they want something like, to marry a specific girl. That happens a lot in Disney movies, right? Like they're motivated by their desire for that person. Instability. Maybe they're really unstable, and so that's the thing that drives them. Maybe it's more noble, like love or loyalty or honor or protection. I like to think, this just made me think of Mulan, the movie Mulan, how, why did she decide to dress like a man and go to war? Well, a couple reasons. One is that she wanted to protect her family. So protection motivated her, honor motivated her, love and loyalty motivated her. She was motivated by several different components in this category. Whereas if you look at a character like, gosh, I'm trying to think of characters you guys would know. I mean, you could think of Harry Potter's one that I'm a big fan of. I don't know how many of you have read Harry Potter, but Voldemort is the bad guy in Harry Potter, and he is, in my opinion, motivated by a lot of things, but he's motivated mostly for bad things: revenge, hatred, maybe even jealousy, you could say, because he was misunderstood as a kid, kind of picked on. He was very, very, very smart, but he took the wrong path. And, Voldemort seems to hate anybody that is different than him. And so he's sort of motivated by, I would say he's purely motivated by hatred. But when you really distill down hatred, what does that mean? Well, why does he hate these people? So you could go a little deeper with that too. And you're probably not going to get into things that are quite this deep when we get into the poems. But it's good to remember that all characters are motivated by something. And what is that something? So here's what I want you to do. Think about your favorite movie or book. Can you think of what the motivation or goal was of the main character? Not what they look like, this one. Not their personality, that's the first one. What did they want? And go deeper, because what if it was the story and the kid wanted to win the lottery? Okay, you could say, well, he wanted to win the lottery. No. But why did he want to win the lottery? Was it to protect his family? Maybe they were going to lose their house. Was it greed? Maybe he wanted to buy a bunch of Lamborghinis. Was it because his mom had cancer and he needed money for her cancer treatment? That's love. Why? Maybe they want money from the lottery, but why? Because that's the deeper motivation. And that's what makes this kind of hard. Okay, so let me give you an example of one of mine. I would say, well, my favorite book / movie is Lord of the Rings. Some of you probably have not seen that. Probably a lot of you haven't seen it. But there's this little character, and his name is Frodo. And he's the main character. And Frodo, he's very small and kind of childlike and very innocent. And at the beginning, he is put on a quest. He has to destroy this evil ring. And without getting into all the subplots, he's never left his home. He's never left his city. But he is put on this quest that he's pretty sure he'll die on. Everybody says you're probably not going to make it through this. And if you do, you will never be the same. Why would he do it? Well, I believe the main motivation of Frodo, I'm going to list my favorite character name, but you could list yours, is honestly, I'm going to go back to this list and I'm going to pick the best word that I think. I would say, honestly, some of it's protection. He wants to protect his community. He knows if he doesn't go on this quest, that the city that he lives in will be destroyed, and probably all of their earth. Okay. And I think he's also motivated by love for his friends. There are a lot more complex motivations going on there, but if you don't know the story, I'm not going to even go there. So the main motivation of Frodo is protection, I'm going to say to protect his home and the love of his friends. Those are two things that I think motivate him. Also, I think he has a lot of honor. And so, and pride. And so why did he do what he did? That's what I want you to think about with your favorite character. Maybe it's an Avengers movie. Those ones are pretty easy to analyze. Maybe it's series you read, like a Big Neat series or something like that. Think about what motivates that character. And we're only going to write one sentence or two because we don't have any evidence that we're pulling from today. And you're going to answer that here. And this is just the hint. You know, what drove them to act the way that they did? Like, why did they do what they did? Why did they do those actions? I was just listening to something about Loki because there's a new Loki TV show from Thor. And it goes a lot into why Loki is the way that he is. Why is Loki so angry? Does Loki actually want to hurt people, or is there another reason why Loki does what he does? That gets into motivation, right? Okay, now I'm going to show you this. I'm going to see if I can figure out one character trait of this guy in the poem and what is their goal or motivation. Okay, so let's see if I can find it out. And we're just going to do 2 sentences today. So we're building up. We did one sentence earlier, now we're going to do 2. And then we're going to do 3 tomorrow. Okay, here we go. Just watch me on this one. That's all you have to do. All my life, oh, it's called setting out. All my life, do what masters say. You say, mind my cows. I mind his cows. Cows, me, my children, wife, all his. No more. Nobody owns me now. Signed my ex. Agreed to drive this rancher's cows from Texas to Abilene for pay. My pay. I'm on a journey of my own, figuring out how this feels to be free. So what I'm hearing here, I can infer that this man was a slave at one point because he's talking about master. He's also talking about how he was owned, but now nobody owns him anymore. So I'm assuming he was owned and now he isn't. I know just from what I've read in the past that a lot of slaves, they didn't know how to read or write. So they would, when they had to sign a signature, they would just sign an X because they didn't know how to read or write. So I can also infer from that. And then, oh my gosh, here it's saying like he's finally doing it for pay and he's able to figure out how it feels to be free. So I'm assuming he starts off as a slave and then is not a slave at the end. So what is the one character trait that describes him? Well, I would say probably determined or hopeful, because he's finally, he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. See, he's determined. He's saying no more. Nobody owns me now. It's for my pay, me. It's a journey for me. So he's determined to do stuff for him and him alone now, not for his master. So to me, that says, oh, I'm determined or confident or hopeful. Okay, so I'm going to say one character trait in this poem. Actually, I'm going to say one character trait I see is, I'm going to say determined. And then I need text evidence. So right now I'm just going to say my answer and a text evidence. So the poem says, remember, if I'm quoting exactly, which is what I want you to do, you're going to put your sentence starter, a comma, a quote, and the line you want to use. I'm going to use this line because I think it is the line that best shows that he's determined right here. No more. Nobody owns me now. It's him being determined to get away from it. No more. Nobody owns me now. That's me showing how he's determined. Now, tomorrow we're going to elaborate on this. And I would have to explain it a little bit more, how that quote shows that he's determined. Today, 2 sentences is okay. So I found my evidence that I wanted to use. I state my answer of what the character trait is, and I state my evidence in quotation marks because I'm using exact text evidence. I'm not putting it in my words. So if I take somebody else's words, it needs to be exact quotes, okay? What's his motivation? So like, why is he determined? Why is he determined? Well, I would say, and what is the goal here? I believe the character's goal is freedom. I believe he's determined because he wants freedom. Because look, there he is saying it here. I'm on a journey of my own, figuring out how is feels to be free. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is it saying how is feels to be free? I think it just might be dialect that he's using here, which means it's kind of like just a certain way that certain people talk from certain time periods or certain areas. It could also be a typo, but I don't think that it is. So I believe the character's goal is freedom. The text says, and I'm going to quote it again. So I got my sentence starter, my comma, my quote. I'm going to write exactly what I highlighted there. I'm on a journey of my own, figuring how it feels to be free. And there it is. And I'm putting another quote. Okay, because you want to think about the part that comes from the text as being hugged by the two quotation marks. You're hugging them. Okay. Tomorrow I'm going to have us add a sentence that explains our evidence, but today's just two sentences. Here, I'm going to change the color so you can look at this better. So my answer is the one that's in black. Okay, so here it is. Let me reread it. One character trait I see is determined. So that's how he acts. He's acting determined. I'm going to find a quote that shows how he's acting determined, and I see that the poem says, no more, nobody owns me now. That is evidence of him acting determined. Here it says, what is the character's motivation or goal? Use text evidence to support your answer. I believe his goal is freedom. So it's like, why is he doing what he's doing? Like leaving slavery, signing his acts, going and doing his own thing. Well, I believe his goal is freedom. Why? Because of lots of things, but the main line I chose was this line because it seemed like the best. I mean, these lines, this stanza, I should say. I just thought that that was the best example of him wanting freedom, which was, I'm on a journey of my own, figuring how it feels to be free. So that's why I said the text says, I'm on a journey of my own, figuring how it feels to be free. Okay, so remember, trait is how they act. Motivation is like, what's their goal? Why do they want that? Why do they act that way? Okay, two sentences each today. Here's the next one. You didn't have to do anything. You just have to watch it. But again, you may want to screenshot this because this is a helpful way for you to come back and look again. And the more notes you can keep, the better success you're going to have. So here's the next one. And I actually, originally I said we do, but I kind of want you to try it. I'm going to help you though. I can help you get started, but I actually kind of want you to try it on your own. I think it's better for you. I really do. Let me change these to red so we can tell the difference between our answer. Now, here's where this one's hard. It's about Rosa Parks, right? Most of us who have been alive and breathing and pay any attention to who Rosa Parks is, I hope, at this age. If not, where have you been? Rosa Parks is that lady who, right before the Civil Rights Movement, sort of in the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, she sat down on a bus when colored people were supposed to stand on the bus and only white people could sit. And she sat down. She was like, nope, not standing on the bus, dude. Nope. And her action sparked a movement, right? So here's the thing. The hard part about this one is I don't want you to take what you already know about Rosa Parks from your life and put it on these answers. You have to use the text. So that's the hard part. I'm not asking you an opinion piece here. I'm asking you to use the text. So you might already have a lot of background knowledge about Rosa Parks, but you have to use what this text says. That's what makes it hard when it's about somebody you already know. So here's what it's called. The Many and the Few for Rosa Parks, part-time seamstress. It was an Alabama day for the many and the few. There wasn't really much to do. No one had very much to say. Until a bus, the 415, drove by, but no one chanced to see. It stopped to pick up history. Doors closed slowly on a scene. The quiet seamstress paid her fare and took the one seat she could find. And as it happened, just behind the many people sitting there, the many people paid no mind until the driver, J.P. Blake, told the few of them to take the deeper seats. But she declined. Oh, yeah, it was the back of the bus. It wasn't just standing. I forgot. Sorry. And then Blake stopped the bus and called the police. And many a fire was set that night, and many a head turned ghostly white because she dared to disturb the peace. To celebrate the ride that marks the debt the many owe the few, one day of freedom grew into the century of Rosa Parks. So I think what they're saying about the many and the few is that, like, sometimes there's this handful of few people that really create change, and those few people make change that then spreads to many people. I think that's what the many and the few lines mean. Well, what's character trait of Rosa Parks? Well, it's actually really similar, I would say, to the last poem we read. Determined. You could even say stubborn. Stubborn isn't always a bad thing, right? Motivated, maybe. Confident. You have to be confident to do that, right? At a time where you knew you could get arrested and get in trouble. It takes a lot of confidence to do what she did. And I have to infer that a little bit, right? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say one character trait that describes Rosa. Why is it giving me a red line? One character trait that describes Rosa Parks is, I do not know why it's giving me a red line because it is fine. Okay. And then the evidence is, and that's where you're going to pick an exact quote from the text that you think best shows whatever trait you picked. So I'm getting you started here. But I want you to tell me what you think describes Rosa Parks. I already gave you a few that I thought, maybe courageous, bold, motivated, brave. Any of those would work, really. But then you've got to tell me what piece of evidence shows that trait, and you're going to quote it directly and highlight it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to get these written down, and then find what you want to use. And remember, you're describing how she acts, not why yet. And you can also pause here too if you need more time. And I'm not going to tell you the answer. I want you to do it, and then we're going to talk about it the next day. We're going to talk about it tomorrow when I'm back. Okay, let's see here. Now that you found a trait for Rosa Parks in your evidence, you got to tell me what motivated her. Well, we've got to infer a lot here. Infer means to make an educated guess because it's not telling us exactly. This is where we can use background knowledge, we know. But what was her goal here? Why did she sit down on the bus? What do you think? Now, you could say kind of what you know here, but you still have to have a good quote that gives me some evidence, right? So here again, I'm going to give you a starter. I'm going to say Rosa Parks' motivation, but you could have also said the character's motivation. Rosa Parks' motivation was, why do you think she sat down on the bus? Why? What was her purpose for doing that? Okay, and you're going to infer a little bit from what you already know from your life and what you see here in the poem. Why did she sit on the bus? Not how did she act? Why did she do what she did? Why? Now, if you have a lot of background knowledge, you still need to come back here for your evidence part. The poem states, I'm going to just use a different sentence starter. And again, exact quotes. I'm hugging my text evidence. And I'm going to find the line in the poem that shows what motivated her. That's a harder one. So think about, okay, if I think she sat on the bus because of this reason, what's a line that shows her logic pretty well? You could also here, because it's kind of hard to find this, what I'd recommend is think about maybe what happened after she sat on the bus. That could be a good piece of evidence because it shows what happened because of her actions, and you could still use that. Okay. So I've started you with your sentence starters. I've given you plenty of clues, but it is your job to finish these sentences. Good luck.